Hello, good morning and good evening. Today I have come with a new chapter, new concept, theory of reader response criticism. It is written by Tyson. It is in Open University, that is Bachelor's 4th batch, right? And it is in Unit 8. So, what is new reader response theory? Why reader response theory just came in the field of literary study is the idea that is what the writer Tyson talks about, right? She has presented the idea that new criticism has become the base foundation to interpret the literary text on the basis of the text alone. And rule of the text is much more important. Symbol, formal elements, all the things, whatever the ambiguities and metaphors, those features, symbols are important to interpret the text is the idea of new criticism. Role of the reader is ignored. Role of the author is ignored by new criticism. But reader response theory has come in reaction against of that new criticism. New criticism does not give importance to the role to the readers. So, reader response theory gives importance to the role of the readers for the production of the meaning in any literary text, right? Let's see. As its name implies, reader response criticism focuses on readers' responses to the literary text, how the readers respond there. But it doesn't mean that readers can have their own meaning. There must be intellectual member of those readers who interpret the literary text. If they do not become the member of intellectual community and they cannot give the meaning of literary text, right? So the role of the readers in reader response theory means that they should also belong to the intellectual community and they should become the member of the intellectual community, and then only they can give their meaning on the basis on the ground of the literary features, formal elements, and the certain devices. That is what is required in literary theory. Many new students of critical theory are relieved and happy when they get to the unit on reader response criticism because they enjoy the idea that their responses are important enough to become the focus of literary interpretations. Or perhaps they assume that reader response criticism means I cannot be wrong because any way I interpret the text is my response, and so the professors cannot reject it. That is their belief. They think that, but it is not so, because readers also must have certain ground, certain level of interpretation of literary text. But it is not so. Depending on the kind of reader response theory we are talking about, our response to a literary text can be judged insufficient, less sufficient than others. The reader response interpretation theory also talks about the interpretation of literary text on the basis of sufficient interpretation, sufficient meaning. There should not be insufficient and less sufficient meaning of that reader response theory, right? For the production of the meaning. And even when a given reader response theory does assert that there is no such thing as an insufficient or inaccurate or inappropriate responses, reader response theory does not assert that there should not be inaccurate, insufficient, inappropriate response. Our job as a practitioners of that theory is not merely to respond but also to analyze our response or to responses of others, and that analysis can be found wanting, right? Analysis should be almost compare and contrasted with others. Good news is that reader response criticism is a broad, exciting, evolving domain of literary studies that can help us learn about our reading processes and how they relate to specific elements in the text we read, or our life experiences also can have its meaning for the interpretation of literary text. And the intellectual community of which we are a member, this is much more important. If we are not the member of the intellectual community of the particular text, particular area, particular field, and our interpretation of the literary text cannot become the complete, and that cannot become the acceptable interpretation of reader response theory. In addition, for those of us who plan on teaching or are already doing so, reader response theory offers ideas that can help us in the classroom, whether that classroom is in an elementary school or on a college or campus. It becomes useful, helpful for the teachers and the classroom teaching activities. Reader response criticism covers a broad deal of diverse ground. It is not only limited area. For example, psychoanalytic criticism, which, when it investigates the psychological motives for certain kinds of interpretation of literary text, is also a form of reader response criticism. It means, what is psychoanalytic criticism? Psychoanalytic criticism exactly explores, investigates psychological motives of certain kinds of interpretation of literary text, and that also comes under the reader response criticism. It doesn't mean that reader response criticism is particularly related with a particular field, right? It has a broader concept with broader areas of interpretation. Feminist criticism, when it analyzes how patriarchy touches, that is feminism, teaches us to interpret text in a sexist manner, is also a form of reader response criticism. That means even feminist criticism comes under the reader response criticism. Structuralist criticism, when it examines the literary conventions a reader must have consciously or unconsciously internalized in order to be able to read a particular literary text, is also considered a form of reader response criticism, right? And a lesbian and gay criticism, when it studies how our homophobic culture responses our ability to see homoeroticism in literary text, is also a form of reader response criticism. That means there are broad areas of reader response criticism. Reader response criticism covers all the literary texts. We can apply this analysis of any literary text from all literary theories from this reader response criticism. Attention to the reading process emerged during the 1930s. This reader response criticism came from 1930s as a reaction against a growing tendency to reject the reader's role in creating meaning. That means in 1930s, reader's role was rejected. There was a tendency of rejecting the reader's role in creating meaning of any literary text. And there was a tendency that became a formal principle of new criticism that dominated critical practice in the 1940s and 1950s. That critical practice was dominated by new criticism, and when the new criticism dominated the practice of critical creating the meaning, and then role of the readers got rejected, and readers were not regarded so significant, important, and then for this reason reader response theory was burned, right? It emerged due to new criticisms and rejection of readers' role in the interpretation of any literary text. The new critics believed that the timeless meaning of the text. New criticism believed that text has a timelessness in its meaning. The text is itself alone complete. Text is the only best interpretation, and text should not be related with the society. Text should not be related with the readers and the authors. Text is alone in single best interpretation to analyze the formal elements was the concept of new criticism. Now, this reader response theory does not accept it. Its meaning is not a product of author's intention. That was new criticism's belief. Does not change with the reader's response. That was the new criticism's belief. But reader response does not say so. reader response theory, which did not receive much attention until 1970s. After 1970s, reader response theory came in to give the meaning to the readers. Reader response theorists share two beliefs. There are two beliefs that the role of the reader cannot be omitted from our understanding of literature. That means role of the reader is quite important. It cannot be removed. It cannot be omitted from the understanding of the literary text, from the interpretation of the literary text. First is that reader's role is significant. That's why reader response theory emerged in 1970s. The second point is that the readers do not passively consume the meaning presented by the formal elements of the text, by an objective literary text. Rather, they actively make the meaning they find in literature. Readers are active to consume the meaning. Readers create the meaning. Readers do not passively receive the meaning of the literary text. That's why reader's role is important. These 2 points are much more important for the birth of reader response theory, for the emergence of reader response theory. It is against of that new criticism, right? The second belief means readers are not always passive consumer of the meaning of the object of the literary text. Regarding literary text as an object, that readers actively make meaning suggests that different readers may read the same text quite differently, right? And they have a different meaning. In fact, reader response theorists believe that even the same reader reading the same text on the two different occasions will probably produce different meanings, because so many variables contribute to our experience of the text. That means the same reader reading the same text and first time gets one meaning, reading the second time the same text gets another second different meaning, third time, fourth time and fifth time reading does have different meaning. So it is specially because of the experience of the readers in the text. Knowledge we have acquired between our first and second reading of a text depends upon our personal experiences that have occurred in the interim, or it depends on the change of the mood between our two encounters with the text, first encounter and second encounter, or a change in the purpose for which we are reading. It can all contribute to our production of different meanings of the same text. The same reader producing second time and third time depends upon the experiences of the reader, depends upon the change of the proposed mood of the readers, and then same proposes of the readers for which they are reading. So meaning would be different by the same reader to the same text from the first and second and third reading of the literary text. There is an example. Example is the house passage. There are two boys. The two boys ran until they came to the driveway, and they talk about their house. And I told you today was good for skipping school, said Mark. Mark is one boy. Mom is never home on Tuesday. This is what he says. He added. Tall is the house from the road on. So the pair strolled across the finely landscaped yard. There is a finely landscaped yard. I never knew your place was so big, said Pete, right? Yeah, but it is nicer now than it used to be since Dad had the new stone sliding put on and added the fireplace. This is another thing that what his father has placed in the house. There were front and back doors and a side door which led to the garage, which was empty except for 3 parked 10 speed bikes. There were 3 parked and then 10 speed bikes there in the house. They went in the side door, Mark explaining that it was always open in the class. His younger sisters got home earlier than his mother, so it was meaningful. Pete wanted to see the house, so Mark started with the living room. He took him to the living room. It, like the other rest of the downstairs, was newly painted. Mark turned on the stereo, the noise of which worried Pete. Don't worry, the nearest house is a quarter of a mile away. That is what it says. Mark saw it. Pete felt more comfortable observing that no houses could be seen in any direction beyond the huge yard. The dining room was there with all the china, silver, and cut glass. Was no place to play. So the boys moved into the kitchen. There was no place, and then they moved in the kitchen where they made sandwiches. Mark said they would not go to the basement because it had been damp and musty ever since the new plumbing had been installed. This is the house, right? This is where my dad keeps his famous painting and his coin collection. Mark said as they peered into the den, as they looked into the den. There was even den. Mark bragged when he was proud that he could get spending money whenever he needed it, since he had discovered that his dad kept a lot in the desk drawer. There were 3 upstairs bedrooms. This is the description of the house. Mark showed Pete his mother's closet, which was filled with furs, and the locked box which held her jewels. There were even jewels. His sister's room was uninteresting except for the color TV, which Mark carried to his room. Mark bragged that the bathroom in the hall has his, since one had been added to his sister's room for their use. The big highlight in his room, though, was a leak in the ceiling where the old roof had finally rotted. This is a passage. This is a description of a house. 2 boys, Mark and Pete, have been there, all right, and they are discussing, talking about their house. Now, the same text can be studied, can be interpreted from 2 different levels. Let's see the interpretation. Many readers probably would produce a list of positive and negative qualities, something like the following. Positive qualities: tall hedges, that is a privacy. Finely landscaped yard, that is a richness. Alright. Stone siding, very good. Fireplace is there. Garage is there, that's a facility. Newly painted downstairs. Nearest house, and house is away from 1 and 4 mile away. This is a privacy. There is a den. 3 upstairs bedrooms are there. New bedrooms added to bedrooms. Bathrooms added to bedroom. Right. These are all positive qualities in general study. Now negative qualities: only damp is there. Only musty basement is there. New plumbing amiss, that is again installed. And then rotting roof is there. Leak in bathroom ceiling. These are negative. So we can find both positive and negative aspects of the text by reading it, right? And then positive points are more than the negative points while analyzing this text. But this is a general interpretation of the text from the reader response theory. Now, read the passage and underline any detail, positive or negative, that you think would be important if you were casing the house in order to rob. That means if it is studied from the point of view of robbing, it is the best then. Many readers probably would produce a list of positive and negative qualities, something like this. The following, see, all are positive for the robbers. From the purpose of reading of this text, this passage of the house, from the point of view of robbery is all positive. No negative qualities are there. Tall hedges, that means safe from observation. No one can see. No one home at Thursday. Thursday there would be no one at home. So robbers can come and rob. And finally, landscape yard. These folks have money because this is a beautiful yard. 3 bike and 10 speed bikes in garage. See there, that is another benefit. Maybe they are rich. Side door is there to run away for the robbers. Always left open. Nearest house, there is always open. Nearest house is 1.5 mile away, safe from observation. Many portable goods are there. Stereo is there, china, silver, cut glass, paintings, coin collection, purse, box of jewels, TV set, cash kept in desk drawer. These are all positive qualities for the robbers. So there are no negative qualities. And from the point of view of the robbers, the interpretation of this text from the reader's response is different from general interpretation, right? During the second reading of this passage, because we are thinking of robbing the house, we focus on very different details, and even when we focus on the same details, they have a different meaning for us. That's why the same reader reading second time with a different purpose does have a different meaning. See, the first purpose was finding general reading positive and negative. Second reading was especially for from the point of view of the robbers. And second reading became different and so many positive points for the robbers, right? No negative points. So same readers can have different meaning in different readings. For example, the privacy that is an asset for many home buyers becomes a liability in terms of the home's vulnerability for burglars. It is a very good for the buyers. Privacy is there, but the buyers, if anyone wants to buy the house, no one wants to buy because it is vulnerability, very possibility of burglars, very good place for burglars. Merely changing the purpose for which we read the passage can radically alter the passage we read. The meaning is altered, meaning is changed, right? Of course, some home buying readers might immediately see the negative aspect of the home's privacy because their experience has made them more aware of the crime. There is a privacy, there would be crime, there would be robbers, and home buyers might not buy this house. Illustrating reader response theory's assertion that readers draw on their personal experiences to create meaning, right? Theorists disagree about how our responses are formed and what role, if any, the text plays in creating them. Theorists are there. These theorists do not accept, they disagree about the opinions. Opinions range from the belief that the literary text is active as the reader in creating meaning to the belief that the text does not exist at all except as it is created by readers, right? Reader response theory may be loosely organized under 5 headings. See there: transactional reader response theory, affective stylistics, subjective reader response theory, psychological reader response theory, and social reader response theory. This is loosely organized classification of reader response theory. It is important to remember that these categories are somewhat artificial. They are not the just hard and fast division of the classification of the reader response theory, right? The dividing lines are often fluid and indistinct because practitioners in different schools will hold some ideas in common, while practitioners within each school will differ on the same points, right? Now, what is transactional reader response theory then? See, transactional reader response theory is developed by Louis Rosenblatt. It is formulated by Louis Rosenblatt. It is the transaction of the meaning between the text and the reader. It is the transformation of the meaning between the readers and the reader and the text, right? Okay, often associated with the work of Louis Rosenblatt, who formulated many of its premises. Transactional reader response theory analyzes the transaction between the text and the reader, transformation of the meaning between the text and the reader. Rosenblatt does not reject the importance of the text in favor of the reader, right? Rather, she claims that both are necessary in the production of the meaning. That means Rosenblatt does not say only text is important, only readers are important. She claims that text and readers are both important for the transaction of the meaning, for the transformation of the meaning. Then how does this transaction take place then? Okay, as we read a text, it acts as stimulus to which we respond in our own personal way, right? Feelings, associations, memories occur as we read. When we go on reading, our feelings take place there, associations are there, memories are there, experiences are there, and these responses influence the way in which we make sense of the text as we move through it, right? The text guides our self-corrective process as we read and will continue to do so after the reading is finished if we go back and reread a portions or the entire text in order to develop or complete our interpretation. Thus, the creation of the poem, the literary work, is a product of transaction between the text and the reader. both of which are equally important to the process. In order for this transaction between text and the reader to occur, however, our approach to the text must be, in Rosenblatt's words, aesthetic rather than efferent. Efferent means okay, taking away, running away. There must be aestheticism, there must be pleasure, there must be joy when we are reading the text. We must not be just running away from the text. When we read in the aesthetic more, the experience a personal relationship to the text that focuses our attention on the emotional subtleties of its language and encourages us to make judgments. When we are reading the text from aesthetic point of view, from aestheticism, and we keep it is generally the judgment that encourages to have the judgment and focuses our attention to give emotionally to the text, and that is meaningful. Without the aesthetic approach, there could be no transaction between the text and the reader to analyze. There must be aesthetic approach. And those who follow Wolfgang Isor might explain what Rosenblatt refers to is the blueprint and stimulus function of the text in terms of two kinds of meaning every text offers. There are two kinds of meaning every text offers, that is determinate meaning and an indeterminate meaning. Determinate meaning refers to what might be called the facts of the text. Determinate means whatever it is said in the text. Right? Certain events in the plot are physical descriptions clearly provided by the words on the page is called determinate meaning. Factual meaning, provided meaning by the text, provided meaning by the book is called determinate meaning. In contrast, indeterminate meaning or indeterminacy refers to gaps left by the authors in the text, such as actions that are not clearly explained or that seem to have multiple explanations, which allow or even invite readers to create their own interpretations, right? Gaps, and readers would be interpreting the text through the gaps left by the readers. That is called indeterminate meaning, where the author can have left the just gaps, many spaces, and their readers are free to interpret it, free to create the meaning, and that is called indeterminate meaning. Right? For the aesthetic reading, aesthetic approach means finding determinate and indeterminate meaning. Reader's role is important to find indeterminate meaning. Maybe determinate meaning is easy to find for anyone, but for readers, readers are there to explore, investigate the indeterminate meaning gaps left in the text by the author. For Isor, though the reader projects meaning onto the text, reading activities through which we construct the meaning are pre-structured by or built into the text. In other words, Isor believes that the text itself guides us through the processes involved in interpreting, projecting meaning onto it, right? According to the transactional theorists, different readers come up with different acceptable interpretations because the text allows for a range of acceptable meanings. That is, a range of meanings for which textual support is available. That means different readers come with different interpretations, different acceptable interpretations, acceptable meanings. This is why there would be the transaction of the meaning of different types of meaning from different readers. The transactional analysis relies on a good deal of the authority of the text, but the text is the author, has the power. There is the authority of the text. Whatever the text says, that is what the meaning would be there. In absence of the text, there would be no meaning at all. In addition, transactional analysis accounts for the range of successful reading produced even by the new critics themselves, despite their belief that every text authorizes a single best reading. Even though new criticism says that a text authorizes single best reading, they also believe the transaction of meaning is there, and readers and role is also a little bit okay focused even within that reader response theory, right? New criticism. Now, affective stylistics. What is affective stylistics then? Reader response. Affective means how the reader is affected by the text, how he or she is affected by the ideas, symbols presented in the text, and how he or she interprets the text according to the influence that he or she has got from the text. Affective stylistics is derived from analyzing further the notion that a literary text is an event that occurs in time, that comes into being as it is read, rather than an object that exists in space. The text is examined closely, often line by line or even word by word, in order to understand how stylistics means how it affects to the readers, right? The readers in the process of reading. Many practitioners of affective stylistics do not consider the text as an objective, autonomous entity. They do not accept it. It does not have a fixed meaning independent to readers, right? Because the text consists of the results it produces, and those results occur within the reader, right? For example, when Stanley Fisher describes how a text is structured, the structure that he describes is the structure of the reader's response as it occurs from the moment to moment, not the structure of a text as we might assemble it like puzzle pieces, all spread out at once before us after we have finished reading. Affective stylistics is not description of a reader's impressionistic responses. It is not the description of the reader's impression and responses of the impression of the readers, but a cognitive analysis of the mental process produced by scientific elements in the text. It is the cognitive, mental analysis, mental response, right? Not a description of the responses, impression of the reader, but how mentally it is recognized, how cognitively it is analyzed, how the meaning is produced scientifically, right? Although many practitioners of reader response criticism, affective stylistics believe that the text as an independent object disappears in their analysis and becomes what it really is, an experience that occurs within the reader response, within the reader's use of thematic evidence, as we have just seen, underscores the important role played by the text in establishing what the reader's experience is. That means reader's experience is also equally important for the interpretation of the text in affective stylistics. What sort of experiences the reader he or she has got, and how that is cognitized, how that is really interpreted, that is really explained on the basis of the reader's experiences. If a reader has a different type of experiences, and the interpretation of the text also would be different, and the meaning would be different. So reader's experiences cannot be ignored for the interpretation of the literary text in affective analysis, right? Now, subjective reader response theory, another third aspect of subjective analysis, reader response theory. Subjective reader response theory does not call for the analysis of textual cues. For subjective reader response critics, led by the work of David Bliss, is their subjective, right? Readers' responses are the text, both in the sense that there is no literary text beyond the meaning created by the reader's interpretation, and in the sense that the text that the critic analyzes is not the literary work but the written responses of the readers. Subjective means how the mental concept that person individually interprets the text, how individual interpretation is there, how individual response is there, how the person internalizes subjectively and gives the meaning of the text, right? We need to understand how Bliss defines the literary text. Like many other reader response critics, he differentiates between what he calls objects and subjective objects, symbolic objects. Real objects are physical objects, such as tables, chairs, cars, books, and the like. The printed pages of a literary text are real objects, right? However, the experience created when someone reads those printed pages, like language itself, is a symbolic object. Language, how the reader understands, gets that symbol, that language in his mind, and then interprets the text, is called subjective interpretation of the reader response theory. Because it occurs not in the physical world but in the conceptual world. Language is a conceptual. That is, in the mind of the reader, the language comes, and language gives a kind of image for the readers to interpret. When we interpret the meaning of the text, we are actually interpreting the meaning of our own symbolization. We are interpreting the meaning of the conceptual experience we created in response to the text. Concept, what sort of concept we develop in our mind, that is much more important, right? So conceptual interpretation, it is the interpretation created through the symbolic use of the language. It is the interpretation especially brought by the use of the language, by the use of the just symbol. That symbol means especially the language, that language which is quite meaningful, especially to create the meaning, to form the cognitive concept in the text, in the mind of the reader. So the interpretation through the mind of the reader is called subjective analysis of reader response theory. Alright, thus the text we talk about is not really the text on the page, but it is the text in our mind. When we talk about subjective, it is the text of our mind, because the only text is the text in the mind of the reader. This is the text analyzed by subjective reader response critics, for whom the text is equated with the written responses of the readers. Okay, subjective criticism is not an anything, right, that goes free for all. There is also the text. It is not free to analyze. There is a text, there is a language, there are the symbols, there are the elements in the text, and those elements and those ideas are there in the subject. It is a process of creation of the knowledge. It is the process of creating the knowledge, right? We need to understand what Bliss means by producing knowledge. Subjective analysis means producing knowledge. It means producing something different from what the readers has given in the what the text has given in the text. Writer has given in the text, right? It is finding new idea from the text and giving a new knowledge to the society. That is called subjective reader response criticism. Subjective criticism and what it calls the subjective classroom are based on the belief that all knowledge is subjective. All knowledge. Writers write. Writers write. Why? Because of his knowledge or their knowledge. That is subjective. The perceived cannot be separated from the perceiver. Whatever the writer has perceived, understood, that cannot be isolated. That cannot be separated from the perceiver, which is a belief held today by many scientists and historians as well as by many critical theorists, right? Blitz's subjective method fosters a kind of critical thinking. Subjective reader response theory means critical thinking. We have critical thinking. And then after critical thinking, we have creative thinking. When we have critical thinking and we think differently, we think positively, negatively, all pros and cons, and later after having completed our critical thinking, we produce the meaning. And that producing of the meaning is a production of the knowledge. That production of the knowledge is called almost creative thinking. So this subjective interpretation of literary text means creative thinking. This is producing the meaning, producing the knowledge, production of the knowledge, not only the interpretation, but it is the creation of the knowledge out of the text. That is what we have studied from, right? Or the readers have studied from. So it is called creative thinking. It is critical thinking and creative thinking. Should prove useful to students throughout their lives because it shows the knowledge. That knowledge is created collaboratively. Knowledge is created jointly. Knowledge is created collaboratively. Collaboratively means by the text, from the authors, and from the readers. Knowledge comes not alone, not in isolation, but just handed down from collaboratively, and that its creation is motivated by personal and group concerns, right? Personal as well as group concerns is there for the production, for the motivation of the production of knowledge, right? This is how reader response theory goes on. You can read and then enjoy about it and get more information. Thank you.